if we're back on or not. I'm sorry about that. We seem to be having some problems, but I think we're back, hopefully. um, yeah, usually it's been pretty good recently, so I don't know why. But basically, as I was mentioning, we are really getting into now where Jesus has gone out and starting to go out and starting to getting the first apostles. We spoke last week, last time we met, on what was Andrew and Peter, the first two apostles. And that was out in the wilderness. That was out where John the Baptist was baptizing. And we mentioned that Andrew was seeking. He was obviously out there intentionally, probably a disciple of John the Baptist himself. And along with him was Peter, probably just came along from the ride. I don't think he necessarily was seeking as much, or at least he wasn't at this moment. And now we have two new apostles, which is Nathanael yeah, yeah, Nathanael and Philip. That's right. And these two are a little bit of a different. He finds them in a different place, and I think it's really interesting of how he does this and where it is. And we could talk about some of the backstory because I think there's a lot of backstory in this, if you will, that you kind of see with some of this there's some interesting dialogue between Nathaniel and Jesus, and I think we're going to find some interesting parts here to just discuss, and a little bit of backstory on the Jewish people and these young men who were raised in that culture. So let's take a look. Let's read it, and I'm going to read it right now and get into it, and we'll discuss it as we get there. Okay, let's take a look. Okay, so again, this is all very, very. I want to just bring this out. We've been really discussing a section of time here, right after John the Baptist's baptizing of Jesus, and it's in short order, within about 3 to 4 days, that a lot of these things are happening. So Jesus is baptized. Then there's the coming of Andrew and Peter in subsequent days. And then now there is the next day, and you'll see it right here. It says the next day he purposed to go into Galilee. This is Jesus. And he found Philip, and Jesus said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." Nathanael said to him, "Can any good thing come out of Nazareth?" Philip said to him, "Come and see." Jesus saw Nathanael coming to him, and he said, "Behold, an Israelite, indeed, in whom there is no deceit." Nathanael said to him, "How do you know me?" Jesus answered and said to him, "Before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you." Nathanael answered him, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus answered and said to him, "Because I said to you that I saw you under a fig tree, do you believe? You will see greater things than these." And he said to him, "Truly, truly, I say to you, you will see the heavens opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." Okay, so there's a lot of little things here that we can point out. And before I begin, I want to talk about a little bit of the background, because I think it's good to understand this in the context of who these people are and these first apostles, and understand the culture a little bit. So this is in Bethsaida, the same city, if you will, that Andrew and Peter are from. This is on near the shore of Galilee. They're not really sure exactly, in the northern section of Galilee. They're not really sure exactly if it's on the shore itself or kind of off. But there's one thing we are sure about is that these are Jewish young men who, in their growing up period, their life, they go to school to study the Torah. They are Jewish people. Judaism is a part of their life, their upbringing. Okay, it is. It is. I hate to say it this way, but it really does. It would be fit in a modern context where you see Islam. A lot of young people are raised going to Islamic schools and taught Islamic things. In the same way, the Jews here, particularly these Jews, are raised the same way. They are raised in a society that teaches them from a very early age about the Torah. A lot of their education, a lot of their ability to read and math and everything else, if they are doing a lot of math, I'm not sure if they really are. Maybe even their study of science, if they're studying some of that. I don't know back in this time if they actually did that. But a lot of their education is coming from the Torah itself, meaning as they're reading, they're learning to read, but they're reading the Torah. So they are hearing of the Jewish teachings from before they can probably even read. They are indwelt with this understanding of the coming of the Messiah. This is part of their teaching. It's the core element of who they are as young kids. So now these young men, which are probably in their late teens, early 20s, they've been discussing this coming Messiah their whole lives because that's what they've been raised in. It's different as in today. There's so much distraction in the modern world. For them, it's their whole life and their whole teaching. Their parents were taught, they're being taught, and probably their grandparents, and so on and so forth. So this is, Israel and Judaism. Judaism is their life, is who they are, is their identity. And you could say, well, some are more serious than others, and that's true. But you could tell that these four, in particular, I would say Andrew, because he's seeking right from the beginning, to now we have Nathanael, the statement of Nathanael, which Jesus says, there is no deceit in him. I mean, that's an incredible statement coming from the Son of God, right? So I just want to point that out before we kind of dissect it a little bit. So these are just this has been their life. So these discussions are near and dear to their heart, and particularly for these people. I think that's the reason why Jesus chose them, because they're not only just Israelites, or they're Jews that study Torah, but they're also people who are steeped in the faith that they knew at the time. So I think that's a good thing to point out when we kind of read this. Okay, so let's get into the reading a little more detailed. Okay, so we see here, right up in here, we see that he says the next day. So we know that this is the next day in order, right? And this is in order very close to the proximity of the baptism of Jesus and Andrew and Peter, right? It says the next day he purposed, and that's an important word. He was intentional to go to Galilee. Okay, why was he intentional? Probably because of finding these two, Peter and Nathanael. Philip and Nathanael. So I think there's a lot of purpose in this. Jesus knew who he was going after. He had a purpose. And he found Philip, and Jesus said to him, "Follow me." Right? Very, very clear. No, will you follow me? He does this a lot. And I think there's a certain lesson here when it comes to the disciple making. Okay? There is no will you. Do you have the time? There was a sense of knowing that this is Philip in some capacity, and of course knowing Nathanael will be following. he is very intentional, Jesus here. He knows what he wants and he says it. He goes after it. He doesn't ask permission. And I do think, and I've done this myself, I do think there is a sense that if you see something in the quality of a person, you recognize, and he says, "Come follow me." And I think it's bold. It's bold because you better be willing to follow through on what you say before you say that. But it was very intentional. I think there is something to be said. When you lead well, you lead with assertiveness. And that assertiveness is because you're confident in where you're going. You may not necessarily be confident in the course that gets you there, the pathway, but you're confident in the mission. And I think that is what people look for. They want confidence. They are not looking for wishy-washiness. Will you please, I was thinking about doing this thing, and do you want to come? No, I want you to come. Come, follow me. It gives a person who's going to follow you a sense of security. Like there is a intentional purpose, particularly people of God. And I don't mean, and I want to point this out before I go on a little more of a tangent here. I want to point this out. It doesn't mean you're being prophetic and like, well, I see God doing wonderful things in your life, and I see that you're going to be speaking in front of millions. That's nonsense. That's not what Jesus is doing here. You notice that. Nowhere is Jesus doing this. And Jesus is the greatest prophet of all. Okay? And he didn't do this. He just said, follow me. Now it's up to the person to follow him and to be faithful and run their course. Jesus doesn't make promises. He does make a promise to Nathanael. We'll see that a little bit later on. But it's about Jesus. It's not about Nathanael, right? Okay. So I think there's something to be said about that. All right, let's get back to it. Okay, and he says, now Philip was from Bethsaida. And the part about this is important. It's the city of Andrew and Peter. So that's no accident. It's no accident. Why Jesus picks this city? Well, it is a city of fishermen. It is a city of hard workers. It is a city of not the religious leaders. It's a city of people who get their hands dirty, who work for a living really hard, are nothing. They're not the trained academics. Now, they're trained as they grew up learning the Torah. They're not totally oblivious to the Torah. They know the Torah. They are faithful Jews to some extent, whatever that looks like. Okay? And immediately, let's look at this in 45. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, we have found him. Okay. Immediately, if you notice these two people, Andrew immediately goes and gets his brother. Right here. Philip immediately finds Nathanael. Okay. You're going to see a great quality here in people that Jesus is getting. A people that have been waiting and discussing and waiting for the coming of the Messiah. It has been on their lips, been on their hearts. And the first person they get is a person who's probably very near and dear to them. Andrew gets his brother. Philip gets Nathanael. Probably because of who Nathanael is and because they probably have an intimate relationship. Right? And it says, interesting, we have found him. In other words, he's including now Andrew and Peter in there, and he's saying, we have found. Who was the one we found? The one of history, where Moses and the law and also the prophets wrote. This is someone that they have been waiting for, that they know was spoken of in the Old Testament, in Deuteronomy 18 in particular. Okay, this is someone they know. that they've been waiting for. Moses talks about him, and the prophets wrote about him. And now we've identified him, and here he is. He's Jesus, the son of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. Boom. And the first thing that Daniel says, as any good biased person would say, Nathanael said to him, "Can any good thing come out of Nazareth?" I love that. Not that it's good, but this man, who is later on spoken of as a very good Israelite, faithful man, is skeptical. He is skeptical of what even Philip has told him. He is skeptical. But Philip's response is great here. He says, "Oh yeah, you just come and see." Okay, you just come and see. You're skeptical. You just come and take a look. Let your eyes let you meet this man personally. I'm not going to vouch for him. You come and see yourself. Great thing. Remember, faith is personal. It's between you and God. Not between me, you, and God. It's between you and God. If I'm pointing to Scripture here, just like in the thing that I do, I'm pointing to Scripture. You have a problem with it, you go to God with it. You work it out. You work out your salvation with fear and trembling. That's what you do. It's always between you and God, and me and God, ultimately. But the difficulties come when the body of Christ, as the body of Christ really does here, ushers in challenging moments. And this is a challenging moment. How can anything good come out of Nazareth? And he says, "Come and see." So he comes and sees. And right here, the come and see comes true immediately for Nathanael. What did Jesus say in 47? Jesus saw Nathanael coming to him. Now, we don't know the distance. It's probably, I don't know, a couple miles. Who knows how far they are from each other. He goes and gets Nathanael. Nathanael takes a walk back with Philip. Probably Andrew and Peter are in tow. And then as Jesus sees Nathanael approaching, he says, "Behold, an Israelite indeed." And then he says this, it isn't just in mockery or in like, boy, he's a real faithful Jew, Israelite. No, he says, he doesn't say it in jest. He says it in whom there is no deceit. No deceit. Big compliment. This was not in jest. And you know what's interesting about it? Nathanael in the next verse doesn't say, "Oh gosh, golly gee, I'm not that. I'm oh, you speak, that's not true." No. What does he say? And Nathanael said to him, "How do you know me?" He's saying, "You're right. I'm not deceitful. This is who I am. You know me." So to him, when he says no deceit, Jesus, he was confirming to Nathanael who he is, who Jesus is. Because only Nathanael would resonate with him as a truth. That I'm not deceptive. I'm not deceitful. I live faithfully. I live true. May it be perfect, but he is stating that, right? And Jesus then answers him, and this is a big one for Nathanael. "Before Philip called you, 1, when you were under the fig tree, 2, I saw you, 3. Before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you." Okay? For you and me, in a very, you can just look at this. Well, the explanation could be, and we know it's not this, but I'm going to give you this kind of the explanation here of what, on the surface level of reading this, it could, if you're not really steeped in scripture, you're kind of new to it. You could look at this and say, oh, well, he was kind of standing on a hill and he saw him sitting under a fig tree from a distance, and he saw him, and then I saw him come, and him gone. He's kind of, Jesus is watching this from a far off distance. This whole scene happen, and then Nathanael runs to him, and Philip runs to Nathanael and gets him, and he comes out from under the tree, and that's the flat, non-holy way, non-spirit-filled way to look at this, because the next one answers everything. Right here in 49. Nathanael answered him and says, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. Why would Nathanael say something like that? Because he knows in these three that Jesus is supernatural. This is God. You are the what? Right away. He doesn't even say Messiah. He says the Son of God, the King of Israel. He is identifying two huge titles of Jesus. I mean, Jesus just gets into his ministry here. He hasn't really healed anybody yet. And immediately he is claiming, Nathanael is stating publicly to whatever it's 4 people, 6 people, we don't know. He is publicly stating, you are the Son of God, the King of Israel. This reminds me of the time when Thomas comes after he doubts and Jesus has resurrected, and he comes into his midst and he sees and he says, unless I put my fingers in the holes in his hands or his wrists and my hand in his side, I will not believe. And then he goes into the presence of God and he does both, and he says, my Lord, my God. This is powerful. This is the same thing. There's something supernatural here. He's saying, you are the Son of God, the King of Israel. Because what's going on here is that the reality is more like Nathanael was in prayer. You see, a fig tree is symbolic, but it's also, obviously, there are fig trees. But fig trees are a symbolic meaning of prayer. They represent prayer. They represent a time of I would say meditation. Fig trees themselves in that culture kind of I would say mean that, but kind of insinuate a time of reflection, prayer, and meditation. And Nathanael was doing that. So chances are when he is under the fig tree, he is in prayer to God. And chances are there's a prayer that went out during this time. Where is your Messiah? Will I be alive when I'm just speculating, obviously. Will I be alive to see him come? Would you bring the Messiah? I long to see the Messiah. Whatever Nathanael was praying, then when he says, before Philip called you, I saw you under the tree, the time that you were praying the prayer to see me, probably, I saw you. This would be hugely profound for Nathanael. At that moment, you would know God sees you. And I want to point out this word, I see you. I saw you. I don't know how many of you, and I want to point this out, I don't know how many of you have ever had an experience with prophetic ministries and these sorts of things. I am very cautious when it comes to those things. And many of you, I know, many of you, probably, particularly in other countries, there's big, ginormous prophetic ministries. And that's a big prevalent thing. I'm not going to discount them. I'm just going to say be very cautious about these ministries because they tend to, if you don't have someone who's, if you have a wolf in sheep's clothing, it's a perfect place to take advantage of people, right? So that's the first thing. But I've been around some prophetic ministries, and some were good, some were not so good, because I believe in the Spirit. And the Scripture is pretty clear: the Spirit does move. Prophetic ministry is not ceased. It's just far and few between. Got to be cautious. But I'll tell you what, prophetic ministry, have someone prophesy over you is a great thing, particularly if it comes true. But it isn't about what may come true or anything like that. If you've ever had someone speak over you, and they speak over you something about you that maybe you've been praying about, or something that they know that they never possibly could have known, but God speaks through them, and you know that God sees you, because no one would have known this thing. When you think that God sees you, it will move you beyond anything. Not even what he says per se, or any prediction or anything like that. The more important thing is God sees you, because it's confirmation. It's confirmation. It just increases my faith. It happens seldom. It does happen very seldom, many times. But when you know for sure that God sees you, it could just transform your life. And I think that's what we have here with Nathanael. This thing that Jesus said transformed this young man's life right then and there. And it was profound. And then he says this. After he says, "You're the king of Israel," Jesus answered him and says this. He says to Nathanael, "Because I said to you that I saw you under the fig tree, do you now believe? Do you believe me?" This is a little swipe. It sounds like a little swipe. He's saying, "Oh, you got to have proof. Are you going to believe me?" He's not saying this here. This is Jim's words, but I'm just saying, he's almost kind of saying, well, what if you don't see? Will you still believe? What if you don't have a miraculous prophetic experience? Will you still believe? This is the question. Okay? This is the question for all of us. And I want to point back to this. I want to point really quick to your situation, if you're particularly in a lot of prophetic ministries. Will you believe? Will you have as much faith? Because you don't get a prophetic reading. You don't hear from God the way you want to hear. You don't see the way you want to see. Will you see nothing? Will you still have faith? Right? It says, "Blessed are those who believe and do not see." Here's the reason why this is important. Because many times in my life and your life, we're not going to see things. We're not going to experience things. And if you're experiencing a lot and seeing a lot all the time, and you have to live on that adrenaline rush constantly, the next thing to the next thing to the next thing to the next thing, and you can only abide in God because God has given you some sort of sugar high, that's a problem. That's not faith. Faith is not seeing yet believing. Faith is performing works and stepping out in faith, stepping out in things you're doing, and you're getting no reward, getting no accolades, maybe getting no results. Look at many missionaries who go out into the missionary field, spend years there, and have no converts. It happens. Will you have faith? Don't get stuck on the sugar high. Look, God may do mighty things. He can raise people from the dead. I believe he has done this and still does this. It's very rare, but he does it when he's spreading his gospel. But you may not see it. Will you still have just as much faith the next day if you don't see it? That's what I think Jesus is kind of alluding to here. Ultimately, I mean, I'm taking it far beyond, but I want to be really clear. We do not live on sight. We don't live because I saw you under the fig tree. We live on faith. And it's tough. And if you get really sick or really ill or something happens and you go, where's God? Do you still have faith? If he's silent, do you still have faith? Do you have faith? And this is really, really key. This is key to sanctification, to your growth as a disciple. This is discipleship. Serving, studying, living amongst in fellowship for year after year after year after year, and maybe not seeing a whole lot. I mean, I'm not saying you don't see fruit. There is definitely fruit. I'm not saying that. But I'm talking about the prophetic side. You should see good fruit. You should see good things occur. If you don't, that's a problem. What I'm talking about is having miracles or great prophetic things that come true or great prophetic utterances that come out of some people. And you were constantly living from one prophetic thing to another to sustain your faith. If that's the way you're sustaining your faith, you ain't got a faith. You got a circus going on. Okay? We're not into the circus. This is a long, steadfast journey in relationship with Jesus Christ. And that's what this is. Don't live from one sugar high to another. Okay? Now, even though I say that, and Jesus does give in this section a little bit of hope to Nathanael. He says, because I said this to you under the fig tree, do you now believe? He says, you will see greater things than these. And he said to him, truly, truly, I say to you, you will see the heavens opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on me, the Son of Man. Okay. He says, all right. Even though I just told you need to have faith, I'm going to throw you a bone here just to give you encouragement. You're going to see the heavens opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. That is glorious. We don't all get to see that in our life today. We'll see this as we are in the presence of God one day. We'll all see this. So we're going to get rewarded by being in the presence of Christ, in the presence of heaven. But you got to wait. You got to wait. Sometimes we get to see miraculous things. Fantastic. But sometimes you don't. So this is the way he gets his second two apostles right here. And it's really, really cool to see how he goes, and he's very focused. Jesus was very focused here on seeing these two, getting these four young men. And obviously he's scoping this out probably a while back. The Lord is obviously, the Father speaking to him. I don't know how this is working, but I do think he had these men in his sights, probably. So anyway, God bless you. I pray this has been a good message to see how these four now apostles are coming to Jesus. And it is a great time together. God bless you. Have a great day. Until we meet again next time, you take care.